What's up, y'all, and welcome to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my experiences, my thoughts on my life, my way. So let's get into it. So, right now, I am in this season of transition, and that's love, that's just finances, career, just life in general. And I kept looking for podcasts, or I kept looking for something to kind of help guide me along my journey. And it seemed very hard as a black man, but as a black gay man, and a black openly gay man, to find resources or just other experiences that mirrored mine. And so I kept thinking to myself, like, how do I fix this problem, or how do I help other people, fix the same thing? Because I feel like we're all going through the same thing. So I said, well, why not share what you have going on? So here we are. So again, I'm a black gay man. I'm an openly black gay man. I don't mind people knowing that. I don't mind people liking and or disliking it. But whatever you do, do it from over there and do it respectfully, or else we're gonna have to take it somewhere that I would really like not to. You know what I'm saying? But as a black gay man, I'm 38 years old, and I have been navigating being single for the last 2.5 years. And I was in a relationship for about five, maybe give or take a couple more, when you think about courting and things like that. And so when I entered into this new dating phase in life, I found it hard, number one, because I had just been out of it for so long. But number two, because at 31, I met the guy that I was in love with. And I didn't know that's what it was because it felt so different. But I met the guy that I was in love with. And we just had a wonderful, like, synergy and a wonderful energy and exchange between each other. And it was the first relationship, situationship, or whatever that I had in my life where I really felt good about the person that I was with and what we were doing. And so that looked like being seen. It felt like being heard, understood, acknowledged, affirmed, all of those things. It felt wonderful to be adorned in that way and to also reciprocate that. But what I learned in that relationship about myself was my capacity to love somebody else was greater than I thought, and also greater than I was taught, because I didn't have good positive relationships with men growing up, just because the men in my life, uncles, older brother, older cousins, father, whoever you name it, I just didn't have great examples. And so the exchange, therefore, between myself and men just was purely transactional. It was purely, out of obligation, like family obligation or teammate obligation, because I played sports for quite a bit. It just never felt like a deep, meaningful, interpersonal, intimate connection. It just didn't feel that with any, man growing up or whatever. So when I think about, being 19, 20 and realizing my attraction for men, it was very hard for me to connect in a way that it was very emotional, spiritual, and deep. And that is a lot of my personality. I'm a very feeling person. I seek spirituality, I seek God in my decision making. And ultimately, I try to let that inner force guide me, to my relationships and my connections. But I've not had that with men. Now, women, it's always been very easy for me to, and more comfortable for me to just be like, okay, let me tell you what I'm thinking. Let me nurture you. Let me give you all the things. It comes very naturally for me. But in a male dynamic, it just seemed like I was always second guessing. And I was always like, I have to be on guard with you. And a lot of it was a bias that not every man that was in my sphere to date, they didn't deserve it, nor did they do anything that would require that. But at the same time, or whatever, those undergirds or those undercurrents were just really at work with, like, I have to keep a side eye because I've seen so many things already in my life, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. So coming 1920 and realizing that, it was very hard to figure out what that love dynamic was because I've always been a lover. I've always been a nurturer, but I've always been an analytical or overthinker, as some people call it. And I've always been, very logistical in the way that I do things. So that level of duality makes it hard at times, but I also think it makes me misunderstood by people because they're like, wait a minute, how are you like this emotional feeling person, but you will sit here and analyze something to the floor? That's just the duality in my personality. And so I had situationships. Some of them were okay. Some of them were just what they were, especially around that time being young. But to feel like love, I didn't know what that meant. And the only references that I had really was seeing like my mother, seeing my sister, seeing my brother, you know what I mean? Seeing my dad and my stepdad, my first stepdad at the time. Um, just seeing them navigate relationships and things like that. But it was very hard for me to process because even though I dated as an adolescent, I never had those warm and fuzzy feelings, or I never had that immediate sense of like what I call now ownership. But whatever that is that makes people crazy, they might say the dematize or the pematize things. I never felt any of that coming up. And so I felt like there was something wrong with me for a long time. I was like, there is something wrong with me because I didn't feel that when I dated the women that I dated growing up, and even my daughter's mom. Like the reason why we broke up is because I was like, I don't feel this thing that I see everybody else. I don't know what it feels firsthand, but I was like, it's, I don't, whatever they're feeling, I know that I'm not feeling it, and I don't know why. And so that was the reason why I ended up breaking up with her because I felt like I can't give you what you want, and I don't want to be in a space where I am acting in opposition to the love and the goodwill and all that stuff that I want for myself, but also want for other people as an extension of my karmatic energy. So I was like, yeah, let me just go ahead on and step away from it. And that is something that I've carried with me throughout my dating journey is like, if I don't feel like you're the one, or I don't feel like that love is there, that I need to walk away because it's not fair. It's not fair to the person who really wants love, who wants something long lasting, marriage, infinite, companionship, or whatever that looks like for you. It's not fair for me to be selfish and be like, okay, just because I have you, and you're available to me, that I'm going to keep you here knowing that I don't feel the same way. And so that's something that I kept throughout my dating journey, even up until this point. But the hard thing in that, in switching gears, is again feeling like I didn't have the capacity to love like I was seeing other people love. Now, however, some of it is codependency, some of it is toxic, I've learned, and some of it is tied heavily to physical sexual adult contact with, and there ain't nothing wrong with that because I love a good get down too. But a lot of people tie their relationships to some of those trivial things that really don't matter at the end of the day, or toxic things, codependent things at the end of the day. And I was like, yeah, well, okay, whatever. I know that now, but I didn't partake then either. However, I just felt like I didn't have the capacity to love like other people. And I kept wondering when that would happen. So a series of people, I was like, okay, no. All right, I got excited for a quick second, but then logic stepped in. No. And then you fast forward to me being 31 years old, and I was coming off of a 2.5 year relationship that really started out as like a hookup kind of thing, or a friend with benefits, I guess, kind of thing. And because we were spending more time together, we just ended up like, okay, we're spending time together, let's move in together. And then that turned into what was considered a relationship in name, but to be honest, emotionally, intellectually, and even at the end of it, the year and a half that was on the tail end of that, it ended up not even being a sexual relationship. So in name only was it really truly a relationship. We shared space with each other. We often shared time and some level of conversation, but it was never deep. It was never really emotionally, fulfilling or anything like that. And then the love just there are levels to love, like a basic level of love, of course. you want people to be great, do great, have great things or whatever. But that, like, you're my person kind of love, and like I feel like we are one kind of love, that just wasn't there. And I never felt that in love piece. And for me, that in love piece is that kind of non-conforming to tradition or conventional thinking, or socially, prevalent norms of dating. I think in love kind of defies all of those things, and it's truly a curation of you wanting to be with that person. And all of those, well, you shouldn't, sometimes might be like, well, a maybe. And some of those, I never would, are like, I'm doing it willingly for you. It is that thing for me, and love is that thing that pushes you to be different and challenges you to think different, operate, move different, love different, because you realize that no matter what, you want this person to be in your space. And I'm not talking about what some people would consider, settling, or you know what I mean, anything like that. I'm not talking about that, because that's one thing. I'm talking about true collaboration and partnership, where you understand that in order to get something, you do have to give something. And sometimes that just means this moment is your moment for this, and then next time it'll be, your the other person's moment for the thing that they want. You still get what you want. It's just that you learn that in this game the synergy is so important, and that whatever you do, whether it's something that is on their wish list or something on their vision board, that ultimately it creates the dynamic duo vision for the both of you, and that it is for the well-being of you both. And as long as you guys are creating balance for each other, and it's like, okay, I got you today, you got me tomorrow, or this is my time to educate myself and to pour into that, and take on the load of the house and the finances, and then next year it's my turn. It's those willful things, right? And they're not easy. None of it is easy, right? We all want what we want when we want it. But being in love is that thing that says, you know what, I'm willing to step away from myself, step outside of myself, and step into you, so that I can then fulfill your purpose, or help you fulfill your purpose, and support you in fulfilling your steps. But in also knowing that in doing that, I'm doing the same thing for me, and the reciprocity and synergy in our relationship keeps going around. So it's not about it being easy. It's not about, oh, you're not getting what you want. It's not about you necessarily losing yourself, because when you're always giving up, and you're never getting, that's not synergy. That's not collaboration, and that's not partnership. So that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about that thing that where both of you are aligned, and that what is good for the one of us is really good for the both of us. And if we are both operating under that same operandi, that we are going to be a stronger couple because of it. And being in love, to me, is also the difference between saying, I don't want to ever deal with anything that's hard. I don't want to ever deal with anything that's not perfect to me. And saying, I want to go through the hard things. I want to work through the imperfect things with you. I believe that is the difference. And so, on my quest to find love and to be in love, I understood those things were my core values in that space. And I thought what I saw from other people, I just was like, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. It looked toxic at times, physically, verbal, mentally abusive. It looked obsessive, like it looked like ownership. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to navigate that, because that does not make sense to me. And so as I started again, dating men in my like at 19 and 20, I was just like, okay, this is just, I don't know what's going on. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then I get to that relationship that I was just referencing, and it was a relationship in name only. But when I walked away from that relationship, I really had to think about what was important to me. I had to think about all of the ways in which maybe I settled, or that I just didn't pay attention to particular things, or avoided certain things just because it was easier. And if I'm being very honest, I knew very early in that relationship that it was not for me. I knew it was not my person. I knew it wasn't my soulmate. I just knew it. But I think it was easier for me to live my life and be like, okay, it's convenient. We're here. There's somebody here. I'm not necessarily looking for anybody at this point because I've gone through that in my life, as I think we both most of us have, where it's like I don't really need anybody. You know what I mean? If I have somebody, great. If I don't, I don't. So to me, it just was like, I mean, it's not hurting me until I realized that I was doing not only myself a disservice, but I was doing my daughter a disservice, right? That's my family. Uh, I'm doing him a disservice by keeping him here because who knows what's going on in somebody else's mind, right? Like what you allow from people is what you become to people and for people. And so with that, I understood that by me staying in the situation, I was affirming whatever it was that was in his mind about our relationship. And to him, what our operation was okay. Now, it didn't matter if I said like I wanted more sex. It didn't matter if I was like, gosh, can you hear me? Like, do you understand? Like, oh my God, you're not listening to me when I tell you I'm hurting. You're not listening to me talk about my career. You're not listening to me or whatever. You don't see me. You don't hear me. You don't understand me. You don't really love me, right? No matter how much I said that, the fact that I kept showing up every day and participating in cohabitation, participating in when you needed something because the lover in me is so that I'm going to be like, okay, what you need? Like, how can I affirm you? If it's in my tool belt, I'm going to give it to you. But the fact that I kept showing up and doing those things, it made my words obsolete and it invalidated all of that feeling of like being alone and whatever negative emotion I felt. It it invalidated all of that because I keep showing up here every day in the way that you need me to show up. And so I didn't know that in that, right? I learned it after I walked away from that situation. And to be honest, like I said, I knew very early in that, probably before the first year even ended, I knew that. And I caught myself breaking it off a couple of times. And then you go through that perpetual cycle of like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to stay, or maybe I got this wrong, or maybe I'm looking at it wrong. But the truth is, I was looking at it right the whole time. And so leaving that relationship and moving into just like my me phase of discovery, I felt like, what do you want? Like, what is it that is important to you? What do you want? What is the thing that you haven't had that you would like to have at this point? And honestly, when I walked out of that relationship, I realized that I never had a hoe phase. And so this is 2016. What I realized was I never had a hoe phase. And so I dated around, I'd had situationships or whatever, but none of it was a conscious or intentional effort to just be like, I'm going out of here with the purpose of just sowing my oats. You know what I'm saying? It just wasn't the thing. But I realized in that moment, I was like, well, what does that look like for me? Right? As this person who is an overthinker, this person who is deeply feeling all of this stuff, like, what does that mean for you? And so I sat with it for quite a while and I just told myself, you know what, Michael, just open yourself up and see what happens. And when I did that, I started attracting just all kinds of people, all kinds of people. And that is when I decided that I would have a roster. And I was like, okay, well, listen here. There's two or three. One of them like to go out and do things or whatever. This one likes to do things late at night. You know what I mean? This one is a combo platter. And so in doing that, it was fulfilling a question mark that I had because I was like, okay, I don't know what this is like. I don't really know what I want coming out of this. I already don't know what love and being in love is at this point. So I'm like, okay, well, let me just kind of just see what happens. And so for about 7 or 8 months out of that year, and I say 7 or 8 months because I have this thing mid year closer to my birthday where and my birthday is August 6th. I have this thing where I'm always like, there's this looming a reevaluation that happens as I get closer to my birthday every year. And so I'm like, okay, what is going on? Like, why do I feel this way? Yeah, that kind of thing. But anyway, take you back to the story. I was having these men in my roster, and they didn't all want the same thing, and it was a variation of people, and I was just enjoying the energy and the exchanges and things like that. And so as time went on, like maybe a person would fall out here or there, and I'd replace them with another person, and that would just be, my cycle for those 7 to 8 months or whatever. But what I will say is somewhere between um I don't know, somewhere between months, I want to say 5 and 6, I noticed that certain people stayed around, and I started noticing that those people were operating differently with me. And so the guy that was cooking me dinner, but also being my dessert afterwards or whatever, wanted to have deeper conversations, wanted me to lay on the couch with him and cuddle, and wanted to create these movie nights, and is now asking me deeper questions about, do I want to get married? Do I want to settle down? And that it wasn't necessarily jarring for me, but it sparked a curiosity in my mind because I'm a naturally curious person when it comes to how people think and how things work. That's just how I've been since I was a kid. And so now I am realizing, number one, the conversation, but I'm also noticing like the shift in energy and the direction of the emotions that's happening. And I'm like, okay, I can't ignore this forever, but I do want you to say what it is that you feel so that then we can have a clear understanding about what's happening. But I noticed that with a few of the gentlemen, that was beginning to be the thing. And so in evaluating, what they wanted versus what I wanted, or trying to figure out what I wanted at the time, I was like, it's not fair for me to continue on with these people knowing that they want something that I potentially cannot give. Like, I cannot potentially give. Like, I enjoy what we're doing. I enjoy the food. I enjoy the drinks. I enjoy the sex. I enjoy all of the things that we're doing. But at the same time, I don't have that feeling of just like being super connected, and I would hate to continue going on and making someone feel like I'm leading them on, or I'm intentionally wasting their time. And so when it happened for the first time, I was kind of like, yeah, okay, like, whatever. But then when it was it was a trio, and that's how my signs typically work with three gentlemen. Well, three gentlemen, Lord Jesus, three signs is how it usually works for me when I confirm it in my mind that okay, this is something you need to take stock of. And but by the third person, I said, okay, I have to stop because I noticed the energy is different. Maybe one or two of them voiced that what they were feeling, and whether that was in contrast or it was working into whatever they were saying, I just knew. I was like, yeah, it's not gonna work. So I made the decision at the end of that 7 to 8 month mark. I made the decision that like I'm just not gonna do this at all, because I believe in karmatic energy, all energy, but karmatic energy. And what I would not want is for somebody to spend 4, 5, 6 months in my space. I'm getting used to them, the way that our bodies move together, fixing them dinner, anticipating their needs and wants. I wouldn't want to do that to somebody and have them thinking that we could be something later on. And I know full and well that that's not the case. And so I didn't want that for myself. And in turn, I don't want that for anybody. So I decided that I would go ahead and just stop dating altogether. I was like, yeah, I'm going to stop dating altogether because I don't like the way this feels. And another component of it too was it wasn't that I was being treated like a piece of meat, but because I couldn't get the emotional attachment to those people or the romantic connection to those people, I felt like I was being serviced as a piece of meat. And that was all on me. That was all on me because I was serving meat. You know what I'm saying? I would come over there and lay it down. And so that was all on me. I don't have anybody to blame for that. But I had to move away from that altogether, and even having situationships altogether at that time, because I was like, I still have this same question mark here. And so, when I talk about a hoe phase, I mean, was that really being a hoe? I don't know. But what I do know is it was a way for me to express myself in that way, and to understand like what it felt like, and whether it was good or whether it was bad, I got to experience something that I had a question mark about. But it also led to me really trying to dig into that love piece that I had, picked up along the way, put it back down, picked up, put back down, because I'm like, maybe I'm just not capable. And so I walked away from that situation feeling like I already didn't understand love. Now I really don't understand, because these people are wanting to connect to me and I have an inability to connect to them, although these are some wonderful people. And so I'm like, God, like, what is wrong with me? And so therapy ensued and I started unpacking, what was happening and things like that. And then I finally just was like, just focus on loving yourself and just focus on being with yourself, because what I realized is that most of my life I had to live for somebody else. I had a kid when I was 16, so that was always something. And then I had always been the go-to for my family financially, just because I always was the one to figure things out. And so I would get into relationships, and quite naturally in that too, when things needed to be figured out, I'm figuring out, I'm taking charge of things. And so I sat back and I was like, well, what do you really want? Like, what do you really want? Like, when are you going to take care of you and fall in love with you first? You know what I mean? Because I think that was the catalyst, and that was what I really needed to understand. Like, you have to fall in love with you first, and you're not in love with you. You like you. You know what I mean? You like you. You tolerate you. You know you to a degree, not as in you fully know and affirm and accept and acknowledge yourself, but you know you because you're the only person that's seen every step you've made since you've been here. You understand? And so, in that familial way with yourself, I was like, I am not in love with myself. And why am I not in love with myself? You know what I mean? Like, I'm looking for a connection to appear that I haven't even given to me or shown for myself. So instead of exploring what it looks like with other people, how about you explore what it looks like with yourself? And so I was like, okay, Michael, this is what we're doing. So, I mean, I started like pulling back all of the layers. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like, as a father, do I feel good about my relationship as a father? And I was like, yeah, I feel damn good about the way that I am as a father. Okay. As a son, do you feel good about the way that you feel as a son and a brother and things like that? Now, some of that needed some work because I realized I was pouring more into other people than I was pouring into myself. So I had to clean that up. But then there was also this career thing. And I was like, God, like, I'm doing this stuff just because it's, making money and making ends meet and stuff like that or whatever. And some of it sounds good to say, but I don't feel like that's fulfilling me either. And so I went on this whole journey that started as just a question mark about like relationships and like love and how does that work for me, and trying to feel that question or that void of or that empty space of me being like, can I love? What does this look like? And then it was like, okay, let me look at this situation. No, that's not it. Let me look at this group of situations. That's not it. And then it's like, wait a minute, like, you have to look at yourself. Like, when you gonna look at yourself, right? And so that is what I decided to do. And I just was like, you know what? Challenge everything that made you cringe about you, or the stuff that stopped you in your footsteps. Like, I'm going to do that. And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that because of what the job may think or what my parents may think, or let me, or what is the optic of gating, well, gay dating. We're gonna call it gating, okay? That's something we just fell into by accident. So, but when it comes to gating, like, what does that look like? From my shoes, from my hair, from trying to mute my big personality. So I was like, okay, we gonna remove those guardrails, and every time what I'm saying, we gonna put a stop sign there. We're gonna go ahead on and pack that stop sign up, and we just gonna go ahead and go. You know what I'm saying? The stop sign is for other people because they ain't supposed to come here. Not for me. I'm supposed to keep going. So for me, I was like, I just really have to fall in love with me. And that included the things that I didn't like about me. And it also was about the things that I perceived, or that I would perceive that others would perceive as negative. You know what I mean? So what are your negative connotations about how I show up in a room, walk into a room, whether it's my hair, whether it's my mannerisms, whether it's whatever? I just had to say, you know what? I'm pushing past all that, because in order for me to love myself, I have to accept myself. In order for me to accept myself, I have to acknowledge who I am in my wholeness. And I can't do that if I'm being stuck by the conventions of other people that I don't know, right? I don't know them personally, first, and I don't know how their thoughts were informed about whatever. And maybe something that they have, their descriptors, were based on somebody else they met. And that has absolutely nothing to do with me. So why am I accepting somebody else's, you know what I mean, trauma, pain, responses, reactions? I'm not doing that. We're going to go ahead on and do us. And so that is the thing that opened me up to really understanding love and being in love. And it was really challenging, even the stuff I didn't like about my looks, and then started losing my hair at an earlier age. And just, physically too. Like, there weren't a bunch of things about me physically I didn't like. But one of the things was having a big nose. I will say that. But even that, after a while, I was just like, you know what? I kind of love this little snout you got on you. You know what I'm saying? And that was the me thing that I didn't like. The thing that other people didn't like about me, or that people perceived untoward, whether they were gay, straight, or whatever, was the way that I walk. I got this tricky walk about me. And so I just was like, I even love that. And I ain't hiding that no more either, honey. I was born with a trick hip, and we're going to make it do what it do and a little bit of what it don't. So I just started showing up as me. I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to take the lid off of this personality of yours. We just going to go, we're going to let have. The beautiful thing about that is the relationship that I referenced earlier on, the very first relationship I referenced earlier on, about the guy that I loved and realized I was in love with. And I experienced the best, the deepest, the most intimate type of love, was that once I started loving myself in an unrequited, uncontrolled, very organic, authentic way, it opened up space for somebody else to love me the same, or maybe even more, because by happenstance, I started feeling comfortable with the things that I liked and I didn't like. And I started a LGT talk on Facebook, and that stands for Let's Go There. And I would just talk about all of these things that were confining us as people mentally, because I believe mental freedom is very, very important, and mental liberation is very, very important, to our survival. Mental health, emotional, all of those things, I feel like that's very important. So I wanted to give back what I had learned across my journey to somebody else, in hopes that they felt seen, heard, or understood. And this guy shows up as a viewer, and he's commenting, he's interacting, and I'm like, okay, this is nice. But he always made sure that he stuck out. He would DM me. And then later that year, we just got in the DMs and just started talking and connected over music. And music was a big part of my life growing up. It was my escape. Truly, it was my mental freedom from an outside world that was chaotic. And so when we talk about love languages, I know that there is a set of standard love languages, but within that, I feel like some of these things kind of fall into it as like subcategories or subcurrents. And so music is one of my big subcurrents and is a huge part of my love language. It's how I understand people who may not be able to form just regular conversation. Like, they find a song and they say, okay, listen to this song, because the songs that typically people use to express themselves are very meaningful in the words, but also meaningful in the emotions and the feelings that they evoke, just by the tonality of it, by the beats, the background music. And so, because I am that type of person, I fully receive that. But me and this guy just started on that path, and we're just enjoying conversation with each other. Next thing we met in person after some time, and he knew from the moment he saw me. He said, when you walked around that corner at the airport, I knew. Like, I just knew. When you walked around the corner at that airport, I just knew. And there was just a great feeling of being safe. And it came from being seen, heard, and understood. And it's interesting, because I put on a very form fitting, like, black fit. It was a little track pant with a little black turtleneck that I cut the sleeves off of, and I had on a patent leather boot. And so, when he got out of the airport to come and see me, I was literally walking to find him, because he was like, well, where are you at? Where are you at? And so sometimes when you're at the airport, you kind of know those big columns are there. And so it's so funny that I parked my car, I kind of walked out, and I was stepping around the column, or whatever they call them. And as I stepped, he looked up, and then I could just tell from that moment. And it was so funny that when we did embrace, he said, I knew from the moment that you walked around that corner. And I laughed because the way I walk around the corner is quite a feat, but throughout our relationship, right, we had just a bunch of things that challenged me emotionally, mentally, intellectually, romantically, lovingly. It just challenged me. And there were moments where I was like, I'm getting the up out of here because my defense mechanism is telling me go. But that auto defense kicked in based on everything that I knew about this type of interaction growing up. As an adult, I hadn't had anything. So I said, either you could do the adolescent thing, because that's the only thing that you know, or you could do the adult thing, which is what you've been trying to do for a long time. And so I chose to do the adult thing and work through it, because sometimes your first mind isn't always your best, especially when that first mind is confounded by 9-year old, 10-year old, 16-year old experiences of love, life, and reasoning when it comes to that kind of situation. And so if you realize that that is that 9, 10, and 11 is the last time you've had growth, or you really had any effects from a certain exchange with somebody, you have to then say, okay, the only way to figure it out is to figure it out. And so this relationship with him pushed me to want to figure these things out. If you get upset or you get frustrated and it doesn't look how I think it should look. Now, I ain't experienced it in a good way anyway. I've only ever seen it in a toxic way from people, or I just avoided it altogether. You kind of walking like, I'm about to get up out of here. But I said to myself, let me just go ahead on and work through it and see. And it can't be any more uncomfortable than sitting in yesteryear or yesterdecade. So me going through it can't be any more uncomfortable than it already has been. Right. So let's just go through this uncomfortableness now and work through it with a different set of eyes, a different set of feelings, and a different set of goals and motives, because I can't sit in that uncomfortableness and that question mark anymore. Like, I have to move forward in this. And so the relationship with him really pushed me to, go past all of those things and to work through all of those things. Did I always like the emotional response? No. Did I always like the communication that happened in the moment? No. But what I realized in that situation was, it wasn't always about the initial response, the initial reaction, the initial interaction, or whatever, and it not being about what I hoped or thought or expected it to be. It was really kind of about how, when the dust settled, because it's so interesting that when there's a storm, right, everything is just kind of in an uproar. And this is what I liken it to. Things are in an uproar, things are moving around, things seem tumultuous, things seem very chaotic. And if you are in a storm, right, and you're trying to, hold your bearing or whatever, you're fighting to be grounded, you're fighting to do this instead of sitting the storm out, right? You can watch the storm, but to try to fight a storm really works in opposition of a storm's true nature. A storm's nature is chaos, but a storm's nature is also the beauty after the chaos. It's the watering in the situation. It is the redistribution of things, and the disruption of things as they were. And it causes you to find new and innovative ways to, number one, avoid a storm, work through a storm, be still inside of a storm. So it challenges you to move and operate differently. And so the emotional warfare, the communication, the intellectual warfare, I just started understanding that I was supposed to walk away from that stuff and then look at it and reorganize and do it different. And so when I realized that, right, I was more open to just being like, okay, this happened in this moment. I'm going to sit and decompress. Hopefully he's doing the same thing. And a beautiful thing happened, right? Like, there were moments where I blocked him because I was like, absolutely not, especially in the beginning. And he would pop up in my email, or he would pop up on a social media account I have not used. And, it would be a long, like, love letter or sorry letter, in my opinion. And a lot of it affirmed it, everything that I needed to be affirmed in a moment, which is, do I feel heard? Do I feel seen? Do I feel understood? Now, regardless of if we agreed on everything, because that's not practical, we're never going to agree on everything, and most things are not going to pan out the way that you envision them from watching the soap operas and the rom coms. Very seldom are things going to show up in that way. But when you walk on the other side of it and realize, like, the person did see me, the person did see my heart, they did feel my emotional intonations and inflections. And instead of them running, or instead of them throwing that away, they did the same thing that I did and decided to work on the cleanup after the storm and the preparation so that our next storm is not as devastating. And so that is the thing that transcended, excuse me, just regular, just basic love for somebody, and put that in love category, because at some point, going through things and having differences, um the storms, even if they were very chaotic, even if they were very loud, even if they were very disruptive, they seem to get a little bit easier. They seem to just get a little bit easier because the resolve was quicker. The emotional healing, the emotional acknowledgement, acceptance became quicker, became deeper. And so I believe that was where my where they say there was a ice box where my heart used to be, that song. It is where I felt like my ice box really began to thaw, because what was happening felt so different and felt so in contrast of what I had known, and how I had operated before. But even in it feeling that way, I still wanted to do it, and I still wanted to experience more with this person. And every day that he showed up, I showed up. Every day that he pushed a little harder, I pushed a little bit harder. And I hate when people, I hate to put love and competition in a thing together, or whatever, but there is a such thing as what I would say is romantic competition. And it's those moments where we are one upping our love and our affection for each other. And it is just, it isn't even about the thing that we did necessarily. It's about the response, whether emotional, physical, a combination of, that we were experiencing, from one another. It was the intentionality behind it. It was seeing that person smile, getting that desired smile, or that, what the freak? Like, how am I going to top this? It became that kind of thing on an emotional level, and an intellectual level. And it just made for a very playful, it made for a very expressive, affectionate type of exchange. And we just kind of embarked on that journey. And it was amazing. And I found that, we learned how to de-trigger, when we were having those heated exchanges. Like, we had a word, or we had a gesture that would be like, okay, this is the white flag on the field, because what's most important is that we are getting back to each other. You know what I'm saying? And so to be in that kind of relationship for the first time at 31, um it really did change my trajectory in dating after that. And I always say, everything happens for a reason. I became myself, and I started really loving and being in love with myself. And that opened up space for somebody else to then love and be in love with me, even the things that I didn't like, or things that could be perceived, untoward. But it just worked, and it was possible. And I love the fact that I went through it at such a time when I had such a big question mark about, how do I date and operate? How do I love and operate? But also, like, how do I just be me? And that relationship came through in one fatal swoop, in an unexpected way, and showed me all of those things at once that I was missing, and how sometimes, those interconnected pieces can be missed, right? You'll think that you're looking for one thing, you think you're working on one thing, and then bam, here's that other thing that says, nope, until you understand that these pieces work together, your puzzle is going to be a little spacey. And so I always credit him, and he's 8 years younger than me. That was the other thing that was unexpected. I always credit him with showing me the correct way to love and to be in love because it's super important. But he also set the bar for going into other relationships because for the life of me, I can't even go back if I want. I don't want to, but like sometimes I'm like, it's easier if I just go back and do the thing. But I couldn't even if I want to because it's that feeling of being in love, that process of creating that synergy and curating the experience that we wanted to be with each other. That just keeps recurring every time I think I want to go do the toxic thing or the thing that seems easier. It's that looming thing in my mind that says, this was the lesson. This was the lesson. Okay. Now, them other lessons you failed, and that's why you were doomed to keep repeating them. But then when I gave you the lesson in love, you aced that one. And it's just that lingering feeling of like, okay, you can't do that. You can't accept less than. If this one situation is a prequel or a prelude to what your ultimate could be, don't you ever think about going back and doing the other things. You know, you graduated from high school already. Why would you want to go back? You've done the first degree. Why would you want to go back? Just keep building on. You don't tear down the build. And so fast forward to now being 38 and single for the last 2.5 years, I have to say that dating has been just a real labor pain. You know what I'm saying? Ladies, you could probably relate that have had children. If not, I'm sure you can still relate in some way, but dating now has become a big labor pain. And it's full of emotions. It's full of kind of what if state of where we are, social media, things that have been made acceptable. It's just full of a lot of things, and of those things being full of shit. But I wanted to make sure that I came on and gave a slight introduction to where I'm at in my life right now so that you can understand my experience, my thoughts on my life, my way, and enjoy the Michael experience. Okay. So we will talk more about my dating moving forward, where I'm at, the most recent dating situation from, all the way back to the beginning of the 2.5 years. We'll talk about all of those things or whatever, but this last guy was really a doozy, but we'll talk about it on the next Michael experience. So until next time, listen here. Go ahead on and love on yourself before you can love on somebody else. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace and love. Bye.